The drama surrounding the WNBA has reached a fever pitch, a moment where quiet frustrations have erupted into a full-blown crisis threatening to consume the very foundation of the league. What began as whispers about mismanagement and discontent has now turned into a battle for survival. And at the center of it all stands two names: Cathy Engelbert, the embattled commissioner whose leadership is being questioned from every direction, and Adam Silver, the NBA's steady hand who has stepped out of the shadows to stop the WNBA from collapsing entirely. Behind closed doors, tension had been building for months. Players, coaches, and even front office executives were growing restless under Engelbert's leadership. Negotiations had stalled, promises had evaporated, and trust had disintegrated. The WNBA Players Association triggered the opt-out clause in their collective bargaining agreement, setting an early expiration date for October 2025, a move that sent a chill through the league. That decision wasn't just procedural, it was a declaration of no confidence. What was once frustration turned into rebellion, and the countdown to chaos began. For the first time, insiders began to whisper the unthinkable. There might not be a 2026 season. It was a thought that seemed impossible just months ago when stars like Caitlin Clark were bringing record-breaking ratings and renewed attention to the sport. But now, all that momentum teetered on the edge of disaster. Players accused Engelbert of ignoring their concerns, failing to protect them from poor officiating and mismanaging controversies that had alienated fans. Her relationship with the players, once fragile, had shattered completely. And when leadership collapses in professional sports, the ripple effects are swift and merciless. By the time the WNBA finals tipped off, the league's biggest games were overshadowed by off-court drama. Empty seats told a story of disillusionment that no press release could fix. Even loyal fans began to wonder if the league would survive another year under the same leadership. Then came the breaking point. Reports surfaced that multiple star players were preparing to boycott next season unless major changes were made. And at the top of their list was Engelbert herself. The news reached Adam Silver almost immediately. As the commissioner of the NBA, the organization that owns and bankrolls the WNBA, Silver could no longer afford to simply observe. For months, he had been monitoring Engelbert's handling of the crisis, quietly advising her to rebuild player trust and modernize the league's structure. But her public dismissal of the criticism, her insistence that the league was in its strongest era, had crossed a line. When she refused to take accountability, Silver decided to act. His intervention wasn't symbolic. It was strategic, deliberate, and timed to prevent a total collapse. Reports revealed that the NBA had stepped in directly to stabilize WNBA operations, assisting with emergency negotiations and overseeing labor discussions. The message was clear. Adam Silver was taking control. When Silver addressed the media, he described the turmoil as growing pains. On the surface, it sounded diplomatic, a commissioner offering reassurance. But to those familiar with Silver's tone, the phrase carried a quiet warning. This wasn't patience, this was oversight. He was acknowledging the crisis without outright condemning Engelbert, but everyone could see the subtext. The WNBA was on thin ice, and Silver's hand was now firmly on the wheel. Engelbert's next move only made things worse. In what was supposed to be a calming press conference, she stood before reporters and declared that she was here to stay, brushing off criticism as mere media noise. That comment detonated like a grenade. Players felt dismissed, fans felt insulted, and the media seized on her arrogance as proof that she had lost touch with reality. What should have been a moment of reassurance became a masterclass in denial. Within hours, reports surfaced that communication between Engelbert and the Players' Union had collapsed entirely. Calls went unanswered, emails were ignored, and even team executives admitted they had no idea what the league's plan was. In Fori, the halls of sports networks and front offices, whispers began to spread that Engelbert was finished. She just didn't know it yet. Adam Silver, meanwhile, was done watching. He had seen this before, the kind of leadership vacuum that could destroy years of progress overnight. The NBA's legal and PR teams were quietly briefed on contingency plans, including the possibility of appointing an interim commissioner if Engelbert's leadership became untenable. The WNBA's credibility was no longer just her problem. It had become the NBA's problem too. The heart of the conflict came down to one thing: trust. Players had heard the same promises for years about growth, investment, equality, only to see little change in their day-to-day reality. Some still flew commercial flights while their male counterparts chartered private jets. Others practiced in rented gyms while the league bragged about historic progress. That disconnect fueled resentment, and resentment became rebellion. The players made their stance clear: no trust, no deal. And if that meant shutting down the league, they were ready. Some of the WNBA's biggest names, including Aja Wilson and Nafisa Collier, began exploring the possibility of forming alternative leagues, a move that would have once seemed unthinkable. But desperation breeds innovation, and the players were done waiting. That's when Silver's experience became invaluable. He'd seen the cost of lockouts before: the fan backlash, the loss of momentum, the erosion of credibility. A lockout could cripple the NBA. For the WNBA, it could destroy it entirely. So he began hosting private sessions with both NBA and WNBA boards, pressing for compromise while reinforcing one brutal truth: fix it or lose it. While Engelbert floundered publicly, Silver worked quietly behind the scenes. His calm, deliberate presence became the only source of stability the league had left. Insiders described him as the shadow commissioner, the man running the WNBA from behind the curtain. Each of his public statements was measured but decisive, reinforcing the image of a leader in control of a crisis that wasn't even supposed to be his. But the damage to Engelbert's reputation was beyond repair. Her refusal to take responsibility, her mishandling of controversies like Caitlin Clark's Olympic snub, and her dismissive attitude toward player concerns had alienated everyone who mattered. Clark's omission from the Olympic team had been more than just a roster decision. It became a symbol of everything wrong with the league's culture. Fans saw it as punishment for popularity, a reflection of bias within the system. And when Engelbert refused to address the outrage, it wasn't just silence. It was surrender. Caitlin Clark had become the lifeline of the WNBA, the rare player whose presence could fill arenas and attract mainstream audiences. But under Engelbert's leadership, even Clark's success became a point of tension. Sponsors began bypassing the league office to work with Clark directly. Networks prioritized her games over others, and fans began to care more about her story than the league's broader narrative. It was an uncomfortable truth. The WNBA wasn't thriving because of its commissioner. It was thriving in spite of her. Adam Silver recognized that immediately. He praised Clark's impact publicly, highlighting her as a beacon of progress, a clear contrast to Engelbert's defensive tone. His comments weren't just appreciation, they were strategy. He was positioning Clark as the face of the league's revival and positioning himself as the one leader willing to protect her. By late October, Engelbert's hold on power had become purely symbolic. Multiple sources confirmed that the NBA had begun formal discussions about her potential exit. Officially, the league denied it. Unofficially, the decision had already been made. The NBA couldn't risk its own brand being dragged down by association with her failures. A $2.2 billion media deal was on the horizon, one that could secure the WNBA's future. And no broadcaster wanted to commit while Engelbert was still at the helm. In private, Silver assembled a crisis management team to prepare for every outcome. Replacement options were evaluated, legal risks were analyzed, and messaging strategies were drafted. The plan was to engineer a strategic transition that would allow Engelbert to step down quietly once the new collective bargaining agreement was secured. It was damage control, wrapped in diplomacy. As Halloween, the ominous deadline for the CBA, drew near, the league's fate hung in the balance. Engelbert's silence became deafening, her allies vanished, and her absence from key meetings spoke louder than any statement could. The players, meanwhile, waited for a sign that real change was coming. Social media buzzed with cryptic posts from stars hinting that a new era was on the horizon. Even Caitlin Clark, ever cautious with her words, added fuel to the fire, with a simple but telling statement: "We just want a league worth fighting for." Now, the question isn't whether Adam Silver can save the WNBA, It's whether he's willing to rebuild it from the ground up. The league stands at a crossroads between rebirth and ruin, its credibility hanging by a thread and its commissioner standing on borrowed time. Engelbert may have ushered in an era of visibility, but her inability to lead through crisis has left the league fractured and fragile. And now, the man who never planned to run it may have no choice but to take it over completely, because when the clock strikes midnight on October 31st, one truth will remain. The WNBA's survival no longer depends on promises or press conferences. It depends on